Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Kais. My name is Bill Lawrence. Our first speaker was Monji Dawedi, who is the Senior Program Officer at CSID. I am the Director of Middle Eastern and African Programs at CSID. And Kais is the Chargé d'Affaires and Deputy Chief of Mission at the Tunisian Embassy. Before I introduce Alberto, let me just add something which has been mentioned, but I don't think it's been mentioned clearly enough. The House passed a bill that included the full administration request, which is surprising given what we know about the House and the administration and their relationship. The Senate just cut $50 million from their requests, mostly security funds, after two spectacular terrorist attacks in Tunisia, unprecedented in Tunisian history, unprecedented attacks on tourists since '97 in Egypt. And here we are cutting, right after a presidential visit, $50 million of support to Tunisia. This is the wrong message. This is the wrong time. This is the wrong way. And it wasn't done because of anything Tunisia's doing. Tunisia got swept up in Washington politics. And what we're trying to do is pull Tunisia out of the Washington political conundrum that they've been sucked into and reassert the importance of Tunisia, both in terms of its place as the Arab world's only true democracy right now and preserving its future as such, and because it's a bulwark against extremism if democracy's succeeding in the region. Our next speaker, whose fuller biography can be found in our event announcement and online, still should be considered one of the premier communicators regarding the Arab and Muslim world in Washington, D.C. and globally. I knew him at the State Department as one of the only people who could express in Arabic U.S. government positions in the Arabic media with clarity and the full sort of professional treatment it needs. And he often would make comments sometimes, which would get him in a little bit of trouble, which I remember. But he always got back out of trouble again because he's such an excellent communicator. He was ambassador in Africa. He had several important senior positions at the State Department, including he was the first or second director of the office whose main purpose is to message back at ISIS, message back at AQIM. And he did a masterful job, recently left government in high demand, and is now vice president of memory. And it is our pleasure to invite Alberto Fernandez to share his wisdom on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Your Excellency. It's delighted to be here with all of you today. This is the second time I've spoken at a CSID event, although the last time was quite a few years ago. You know, it's fitting and important to talk about Tunisia and the assault it is facing today from violent Islamists like ISIS and like Al-Qaeda and the Islamic Maghreb. Tunisia's reality and its potential success is supremely important for its people, of course, but also for the region. The Arab world has, in my opinion, no compelling success story today, nothing that is really applicable across the board to the Arab masses and the Arab media that we can present. There are no lost causes, but if Syria represents the worst case scenario in the Arab world, then Tunisia still, despite the terrorism, despite the recent horrific attacks, still has this potential to be eventually one of those success stories. Tunisia's success, its economic success, its political success, its security success, is a blow against extremism. It's a blow against Al-Qaeda, and it's a blow against the ISIS model, as I will elaborate in a bit. You know, more people live in the Republic of Tunisia than live in ISIS land, this amorphous area between, you know, the suburbs of Aleppo and Mosul. The Arab Spring, inaugurated in December 2010 by events in Tunisia and the subsequent events there, in Egypt and Yemen and beyond, have caused all sorts of reevaluations in the East and the West. It's also true among jihadists. They also reevaluated the situation. In the summer of 2012, a leading pro-Al-Qaeda cleric, Abu Munzir al-Shinkiti, by his name maybe Mauritanian, although nobody really knows, issued a remarkable document in Arabic called We Are Ansar al-Sharia, Nahnu Ansar al-Sharia, which outlined a course of action for Salafi jihadists. This is his term. He's a Salafi al-Jihadiyya. In the new political space where competition would be between both secular nationalist forces and with rival Islamists like the Muslim Brotherhood in its various incarnations. Shinkiti in his document was not referring to Tunisia per se or Tunisia alone, or he wasn't referring specifically to the Tunisian Ansar al-Sharia founded by Ben Hassin in 2011, but he was making a larger point about the civil work of jihadist groups, something that, I don't know the term in English, it exists in Spanish, we call it trabajo de hormiga, the work of an ant, the patient, small, steady work that you do to build, to burrow from within, to undermine, to subvert fragile and nascent democratic societies. This included the work broadly defined by Shinkiti and by Ansar al-Sharia and by others, broadly defined under dawah, propaganda or propagating, of building networks and relationships, awareness building, propaganda, and all of it. In a sense, it was an alternate model at the time to what was to be followed by ISIS, which focused on building a real state wholesale out of the anarchy and dysfunction of Syria and Iraq. Why has the ISIS siren call been so attractive to some Tunisians? I think first of all, we have to say it's perhaps because Syria's violence is seen as Ben Ali on steroids. The seemingly clear black and white struggle, the human cost and need to do something in the ongoing carnage in Syria has proven irresistible to thousands of Muslims worldwide. This is something that I've spoken many times. I actually said it in government. I've said it outside of government. One cannot underestimate the power and the importance of Syria and the extremist narrative. That's certainly true in the key years when many in Washington thought that the threat was over. 2012, 2013, 2014, what I call the victory phase, the mission accomplished phase of between the death of bin Laden and the fall of Mosul. It is at that period that Syria is the mobilizing factor for extremists, for people who want to do something throughout the Muslim world, including Tunisia. The ISIS message on Syria, the jihadist message on Syria, succeeded because it was a combination of three very powerful elements. One, something which is true. The Muslims, certain Muslims, are being slaughtered, were being slaughtered in huge numbers, in large numbers in Syria. That is a true thing. The second part, you can do something about it. You in Kasserine, you in Manchester, you in the suburbs of Paris, you yourself can make a difference. And third, there's something special that comes out of that. There, of course, is a new element, and that's the element of the caliphate, which kind of supersedes a little bit the narrative about Syria after the declaration of the caliphate in June 2014. One of the important things here is that Tunisia has an incredible opportunity to develop, to be something which is desperately needed in the struggle against ISIS. It's not a perfect fit, but it's an important fit, and that is a Sunni Arab Muslim alternative to the carnage, the state, the proto-state that we see in that area of Al Jazeera and Mesopotamia. In the Arab world today, we have at least three contending models. We have the jihadist model, typified by ISIS and its rivals in Al Qaeda, and it must be said, the largely authoritarian state model, which has been the default position in the Arab world for decades, and which still clings to power. And this authoritarian model at times is the routine thuggishness, which we have been accustomed to, and other times the horrific violence with the unrelenting mass bloodletting we see in Syria. And then there's the new model, which is best typified by Tunisia. And the irony is that that model, the one that we should be most in favor of, the one that is most like us, the one that is most promising, seems to be the one that is the loneliest outlier. it is testimony, sad testimony to the skewed priorities in the world we live in, that it seems like that there's more inertia, power, and money behind the jihadist model and the traditional authoritarian model than there is with this new, compelling, and important example that Tunisia represents. So it's incumbent on all of us to make Tunisia not only an economic and political success, a security success, but an ideological one that can be seen as having some sort of credibility and applicability throughout the Arab world. There's this important term in Arabic, we talk about haybat al-dawla, the awe and prestige of the state, the power of the state, the dignity of the state. All too often in the Arab world, haybat al-dawla has meant the brutality of the state, the power of the state to make your life miserable, to enforce its will upon you. That's what it's meant all too often. That's what it means in many places in the Arab world today, in most places in the Arab world today. Tunisia has an opportunity, and we have an opportunity to work with it, to reinvent a term like that, where the power and prestige of the state is about a state which is humanistic, a state which is tolerant, a state which is democratic and progressive. This means, in my view, taking a page out of the Ansar Sharia and the ISIS book, and first looking at retail, homemade radicalization, and also propagation through social media. When we look at radicalization, we see that it occurs in clusters. This is true in the West and in the East, in certain families, sectors, groups, and areas. So there is an intimate, direct process done on a very local level. There's also an intimate, direct process that occurs in social media as well. So the fight for extremism in Tunisia may well be fought with economic development and political dialogue, may be fought at the Bardo Museum and at the tourist beaches of Sousse, but it will also be won in places like Kasserine and Ben Gardan, where many have actually become terrorists either within Tunisia or in places like Syria. His Excellency was talking about Tunisia, an example, and punching above its weight. That's very true, but we are not where we need to be in terms of Tunisia as a model for the region. It is not seen as much as it should be as a model for the Arab world, and indeed a model for the Muslim world. And that is something that it is in all our interest to work to see happen. President Obama recently noted that ISIS can only be ultimately defeated by an ideological response to what is an ideological problem. And Majid Nawaz, a former radical Islamist who is now a British political figure and contributed to Prime Minister David Cameron's recent speech, defined the problem this way. Islam, a religion like any other religion, with very good things. Islamism, desire to impose a version of Islam on society, and jihadism, using force to spread Islamism. So if we say that the plague that is Islamist terrorism is some sort of political crime, we know that experts often say that a crime has two parts: motivation and opportunity. If we see Syria, obviously the opportunity there, Syria and Iraq, is the implosion of the state, the anarchy, the sectarian bloodletting. If we see motivation, motivation, of course, is a specific worldview, the Takfiri, Salafi, Jihadi worldview, which we've come to know so well. We need to work on both opportunity and motivation, to strengthen states, to strengthen state cultures, but to also strengthen, to work on the motivational part, to provide this alternative that would be attractive to people. There are green sprouts of political reform and hope in the darkest places in the Arab world. Even in the horrific situation which is Syria, we see small groups, individuals, organizations working hard to present an alternative to the horrors and violence of either the Assad regime, an authoritarian model, or the jihadist model. But in more than any other place, Tunisia has an opportunity to continue to be the laboratory where a new type of Muslim politics can be shaped. I'm not just talking about a repeated Tunisian version of the Muslim Brotherhood. I'm not talking about any specific political party. I'm talking about something more, something still to come, which will be both Islamic in identity and democratic in orientation, by which I mean non-coercive, tolerant, and revolutionary. This is a discourse which redeems the language and the thought. This is, I think, what the president is referring to when he talks about an ideological struggle, a struggle of ideas. It redeems the narrative of the Salaf and the Sahaba. Why should the Salaf and that tradition and that history be solely the property of the Salafis? It shouldn't be. It redeems the human values of all too often corrupted words like jihad or tawheed, and which, as I wrote in that paper I presented actually at CSID many years ago about the Libyan thinker Sadiq Nahum, liberates Islam from bondage, taking the hard task of building a new political religious discourse. It is this discourse which is indeed visionary, but rooted in the dignity of the human person, with all his individuality and creativity, and in harmony with the best of Islamic history and practice. We need to support Tunisia economically and politically. We need to support it in the security sector for our own reasons, and winning against terrorism for our own reasons. But we need to support it as a place where a new, humane, and revolutionary form of discourse by Muslims and largely for Muslims, but also for the world at large, finds fertile ground. Thank you.